Hi, I'm Kenney Baden. What a Friday afternoon it is, and what a Friday afternoon we have for you. You stay tuned, because when we're in trials here at Law and Crime, it's the best, and I'll tell you why. We're going to be going to later on the Shayna Huber's trial. We're going to be going to the Roy Oliver trial, where 2 defendants are testifying. I can't believe it. In my whole career, I've never done that. But before we do that, we're going to also talk about the top crime stories, because I know you've been so involved listening to the trial testimony, you don't know what they are. But we're going to have them for you, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be great, and it's not going to be as tragic as you hear when you hear about the deaths of George Edwards later on and Shayna Huber's boyfriend Ryan Poston. So, are we almost ready to go there? We're ready. Let's go.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on LawandCrime.com and across the country. A GoFundMe page set up to raise money for a man who punched a sex offender during a sentencing hearing has reportedly raised more than $3,500 towards his legal defense fund. 45-year-old Kevin Patrick Smith was arrested after he punched defendant Donald Courtney Biggs, who was convicted for illegally filming dozens of young victims showering, undressing, and using the bathroom. Smith, a father of 2 of the victims, faces charges of obstructing governmental or judicial administration, 4th-degree assault, and disorderly conduct. 3 suspects in Indianapolis are facing charges after reportedly robbing and killing a Papa John's delivery driver before taking the pizza he was delivering home to eat. The suspects, 18-year-old Jawan Terry, 18-year-old Jason Epierds, and 19-year-old Jason Dale, are accused of luring 24-year-old Lavon Drake to a vacant rental house where they allegedly robbed and killed the Papa John's driver. Police were able to track the suspects to a nearby apartment complex where they reportedly went home to eat the pizza. The suspects face charges of murder and robbery. An officer in Houston is seen on bystander footage begging a security guard to stop filming and help him subdue a robbery suspect. The unidentified officer can be seen desperately trying to subdue 17-year-old Devon Miller while witnesses filmed the incident.
Why are you doing that? Why you do that? Why did you do that? Stop grabbing my gun! Oh my God! Oh, that was good! Oh, that was good! Oh, that was good! Stop fucking filming!
The unidentified security guard was fired once the video went viral. Miller now faces a charge of disarming a police officer. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Only on Law and Crime are you going to get that type of story, and it's one I want to talk about with Nicole. Nicole DeBorde was on with me last week. She was frozen. I don't mean frozen like in the movie, but her Skype wasn't working. So, Nicole, hi, how are you today?
Hopefully I'm not frozen.
Let me just tell the viewers that you are a former prosecutor and a defense attorney now, and have been involved in some major cases, including wrongful convictions, that you have had people exonerated. So you know what you're talking about from all ends. But let's talk about that video of just the cops subduing the person with the security guard. All these people are standing around with their iPhones, right? Photographing.
Yeah.
What's going on in the world?
It's a sign of the times. It's and you've got a security guard who is just filming. There's plenty of people filming. It would have been nice if he would have helped in that circumstance. You can see that that officer is clearly struggling, and it really escalates into a very dangerous circumstance very quickly. And you can hear the desperation in that police officer's voice. And he was doing what he could to handle this as safely as possible.
Yeah, and you know what I see too? I see that he has the suspect. He has the suspect with his back on the ground, which means the likelihood of the suspect getting killed because he can't breathe is not there. So he's doing everything right, and he can't get help. I don't know about that. So here we see a good cop, and later on we're going to talk about a person that the prosecution says is a bad cop. But before that, have you been following the Shayna Huber's trial this week?
I have. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, she admitted she killed her boyfriend Ryan Poston, right? 6 shots, right? And
she's
now
admitting it. She's saying, I had to do it, but I did it.
And so she had to do what she says. Now, her prosecution is what's called an EED defense, extreme emotional disturbance. And it's law in many states. New York has it. I've used it. I've used it in a case with a team, and we actually got a manslaughter conviction because of it. But she said here that she was so abused by him, she shot him. Do you see other defenses in this EED defense?
You know, I don't know how strong her particular defense is in this case. hasn't, in my opinion, come off particularly strong. You know, it's what we commonly refer to as the battered woman syndrome, or the battered woman abuse scenario, where the person has been abused so badly for so long that they finally just lose it, basically, and kill the abuser. And that's what she's trying to say. And I'm just not quite sure she's accomplished that.
So we also have the issue that she could be saying that she was abused and she therefore overreacted to what she perceived as his abuse, or she was abused and therefore she perceived things that were natural as his abuse, or that indeed she was abused, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's right.
And the jurors are going to have to believe that, you know, the likelihood of abuse was an ongoing thing and it was real, and that she reacted based on a real threat. And I'm just not sure she's there. So
let's see what our viewers see when we have Shayna on the stand. We're going right to her in a few seconds. I want to watch. Please, you watch. It's going to be interesting.
When you sent Mr. Poston a message as to your plans for getting your things, did you then go and return to the condominium?
Yes.
And did you ever go back to Kenwood Mall after that?
No.
Did you expect Mr. Poston to be at the condominium when you returned?
I didn't know if he'd be there or not.
Okay. And when you got there, just tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happened.
Okay. When I arrived at the condominium, Ryan was standing at the foot of the dining room table, between the dining room table and the back porch, and he was walking back and forth between the dining room table and the back porch, pacing and smoking cigarettes. He smoked often, and he seemed, as I perceived it, to be in a bad mood. That's my perception.
Tell ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the first communications were like.
I walked towards him on the back porch where he was sitting in a chair on the back porch, and I asked him how his day was, and I asked him about, you know, the lawsuit, because I knew that he had said that the lawsuit would be
overruled. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
would be finalized around this time, or that he was still in proceedings for it. And he said that he didn't want to talk about it. He seemed angry, and he brought up the fact that my mother had been up there in the condo that day, and he made it very clear that he didn't like the fact that my mother was in the condominium that day. And he basically made it clear that he was upset about that. He called me a crybaby for having my mother come when I'm an adult, or when I was an adult. He was upset that I had her there, and that he didn't expect it. He started downing my mother. I guess he had seen her that morning at the condo, and he started downing her. He was calling my mother names, making fun of her appearance. He called my mother a fat whore. He made fun of the fact that my mother was a public school teacher. Ryan went to private schools, and he always believed that public school was less than or bad. He had something against public school teachers. He said she was stupid, and that she was crazy, and that my parents were crazy because they were so religious. And he made fun of me for being from less money than he was from, and he made fun of my upbringing and my background, and said that my family were stupid hillbillies from the mountains and not good enough, that we weren't worth anything. He made fun of what I was going to school for at the time. I was getting my master's in education, and he basically said, "You're not going to be anything better than your mother."
Wow. Well, my reaction to her is, if I didn't know everything else about her, she looks really believable. But Nicole, if you're her defense attorney and you have her on the stand, would you have put her on, and it's true, with all that makeup on her, or would you rather her look more like an abused woman?
I don't know that I would have her all made up. I think that her dress is appropriate. She's very conservatively dressed, and that's right. And her hair is conservatively done, and that's right. And sometimes you really just can't control that much about the appearance of the client. The client has to be comfortable. So if she wants to wear the makeup and it makes her feel more comfortably being herself, then it may be fine. But she does sound believable.
Yeah,
today.
and I ask you that because the viewers may not know that when you are in a case and you are representing the defendant, everything is watched, including what you bring the defendant, because you have to bring their clothes to the jail. They get dressed there in the lockup downstairs. They have to be made up in the lockup downstairs, and you are relying on maybe jury consultants to tell you how they should be dressed, how they should look. Maybe in the society it shouldn't be, but exposure and how you look and how you act is very important. What would you change about her in terms of how she's testifying?
Right now, not a lot. I mean, she is providing quite a lot of detail. I have to say, based on what we've heard so far, though, about her, appearing in places where the decedent was unexpectedly, that she was trying to continue the relationship after they had ended it, sort of is in contradiction with what she's talking about now. I mean, it's definitely a real risk calling her, but there's just no way they're going to get their defense to stick without doing it. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, well, that's true. And, when somebody has a broken brain, which she may have, not related to the issue of whether or not she's guilty or not guilty, but clearly there's something wrong with her. She killed somebody. And if indeed she perceived this abuse as instead of retribution and jealousy, that could be a factor, couldn't it, in the jury's mind?
It could be. And really, quite frankly, that's her only hope at this point. She's already said she did it. They were going to get that information in, whether or not she testified. So there's almost no option. I mean, it's a catch-22, but I don't really know what else the defense does besides prepare, and try to get the jurors to understand.
Let me interject here. Maybe the defense doesn't put her on the stand, or maybe the defense puts her on the stand and she can't remember, or maybe the defense lets her admit that indeed she did it, but that she was jealous and it was because of her sexual assault. I'm not sure. I'm not an attorney, but I certainly want to hear more. I want you to stay tuned. More. Welcome back. We're in the trial of Shayna Hubers. This is actually a retrial, but the jury is not supposed to know that. She killed her then boyfriend, Ryan Poston, by shooting him in his apartment. So the question becomes, is she guilty of a homicide here, or is there some lesser crime that she's guilty of, or is she not guilty at all? And one of the things we're hearing is from the defendant, Shayna Hubers herself, and it's so amazing because we don't hear that. And she herself is going to tell us what happened the time that she killed her boyfriend. Fights don't happen in a vacuum. So we're going to hear about the lead up to the fight where she's in control with Ryan Hubers, and we're going to ultimately hear what the death came about for.
Talking about what occurred at the door to the bedroom. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what occurred at the door to the bedroom that night. Please.
I started to walk towards Ryan, and through the door, he was standing in the way, and I just wanted to get my purse and my keys, which were a few steps behind him, on the floor. And he completely startled me when he just grabbed onto me. He just grabbed onto my body, onto my person, with both hands as I was trying to get in the door to get my purse and my keys. And we started to wrestle. And I remember that this went from the door to the bed, and I grabbed on to the bed. I grabbed on just to have something to grab onto, and I remember grabbing onto the comforter, and it didn't help me any. I just jerked the comforters off the bed, and I was trying to get down on the floor to get my purse and my keys, and he reached down and grabbed my purse and my keys and threw them into the other room. And he picked me up by the back of my bra and my pants, the trousers of my pants, and he picked me up from an awkward angle and threw me from the doorway of his bedroom into the other room, all the way to the edge of the short sofa. And I had never experienced something like that before in my life. He threw me many feet across the room, and I landed on the carpet at the foot of the sofa.
Okay. And what happened next?
I turned and looked at him, and he was running towards me. He grabbed me again, and he picked me up in a similar way again, and he started carrying me. And I believed, because of the direction he was moving, that he was trying to carry me out of the house, as he had done before earlier in that year. And when he was trying to carry me, I guess I was kicking, and he fell on me. I don't believe he meant to. And he fell on top of me onto an area between the sofa and onto the footstool. My chest, this part of my body, was on the footstool, and all of Ryan's weight was behind me on the footstool. And he had all of his weight on top of me, and he laid on me in that position for what felt like a while. I'm not sure how long it was. And he had one hand in I had my hair in like a messy bun, and he had one hand up in my ponytail, up in my bun, like this. And he was screaming in my left ear. So his body was kind of behind me and to my left. He was screaming in my left ear.
You remember anything he was saying?
Yes, I do.
What was he saying?
He screamed at me, "You're a fucked up person. And you're a fucked up person because you were touched when you were a little girl. And that's why you can't orgasm, and that's why I can't love you, and that's why no one will ever be able to love you."
Well, you know, whenever a defendant talks to you, and remember, this is what I do, and this is what Nicole does as criminal defense, there's sometimes a lot of truth into what they're telling you, even though it morphs into, or may morph into, a lie. Right, Nicole?
Right.
So when you have her talking about Ryan's trying to get her out of the apartment and picking her up, and she's saying, "I think he's trying to get me out of the apartment," that could all very well be true, correct?
I agree, and it rings true.
And it's true probably because he wanted her out, because we now know, just as the jury, is that he had a date that night with Miss Ohio, something that he may not have known she knew because she was in his Facebook pages. So what I perceive as a juror, when I'm looking at this, it could be two ways. Was she abused by him? This is part of the abuse. Or indeed, was he just trying to get her out of his life because she was crazy, because she was an effed up person, as he said? What are your thoughts?
You know, this portion of the testimony is a little bit more compelling than what we were hearing earlier, in my opinion. And you know, it's hard to make heads or tails of what the jurors are thinking at this point. But she's doing a good job of giving us an idea of what was going on earlier in this relationship, in this day.
But compelling in what way? Compelling that she's an effed up person, or compelling that indeed she wouldn't leave his apartment, she wouldn't leave him alone, she was a stalker and he's trying to get her out and she just won't move? Or compelling that she may have been sexually assaulted as a child by her father and somebody else, and therefore this is how she reacts to things? Compelling how?
Compelling in that she definitely appears to be very emotional about what happened. and how she was perceiving this circumstance. She is very upset by what's being said to her, what she's relaying, how she was being treated. She appears to have quite an emotional reaction to that, and that does appear to be sincere.
And we're going to hear more about how she's feeling and how she's feeling at that time and what her emotions are and what her brain says to her at that time, because she has to do this. She has to talk to this jury. If she's going to be successful in this emotional disturbance defense that she's espousing forward, she really has to convince the jury that what she's saying is the truth.
What do you remember about what happened next?
There's a few moments there where I don't have any recollection. I don't remember how or how much longer it was, but next thing I know, I wound up sitting on my bottom with my knees up under. I was sitting kind of near the dining room table, and Ryan was standing over top of me.
What side of the dining room table?
Opposite of the wall.
Okay. What do you recall happened next? Were you aware? Well, were you aware there was a gun on the table?
Yes. I remember trying to stand up where I was sitting on the floor, and Ryan pushed me back down by my chest. He put his hand on my chest and pushed me back down onto the floor. And I was crying, and I was hysterically crying, and I recall Ryan standing over me and grabbing the gun that was sitting on the table and pointing it at me and saying, "I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know."
How did you react to that?
I was shocked. I was afraid. I didn't understand what I had done to deserve any of this.
Did you get up from the floor at that point?
No, not yet.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen, the jury, what happened.
He set the gun back down on the table, and he walked around the table, and he was still talking, and he was still saying hurtful things. I don't remember exactly what. And he sat down in his chair for a brief moment, and he was standing up from the chair, and he was reaching across the table, and I don't know if he was reaching for the gun or reaching for me, but I was still sitting on the floor at this point in time, and I got up off the floor, and I grabbed the gun, and I shot him.
We know it's really interesting. We're hearing two cases, Shayna Huber's, and later we'll go to the Roy Oliver case, where people perceived a threat and then killed somebody. So here, what she explained is that she's perceiving a threat, that Ryan has put a gun on the table, and then she says something very interesting. I don't know if you caught it. I don't know if he was putting on the table, he meant that for me, or whether he was going to pick it up. But then she picked it up. Now, Nicole, if I'm the defense attorney at that point, I'm kind of cringing at that. How about you?
You know, it does seem a little odd. I mean, it doesn't sound like the best defense situation. I mean, she had been on such a roll, creating such an emotional picture of what was going on, and then we kind of do hit a little bit of a road bump or speed bump there with that portion of the testimony. It'll be interesting to see what the jury ultimately thinks of that.
Speed bump. I thought there was like a stop, don't proceed any further at that point, because really she had to establish, in my opinion, that he went for the gun, that she went for the gun, and they were fighting, and that she shot him, and she was so scared, like the police, that she just emptied that gun out, as opposed to, I don't know whether he was going to go for it. So I figured I'd go for it first, and I would just shoot him. So I disagree with you about the speed bump. I think it's more like a, the road has ended, and we're going to go off the bridge.
It's definitely a problem. I mean, there's a gap in time where she could have chosen a different path, and that may be enough for this jury to find her guilty.
So the jury is the most important thing. What we say is not really important. The jury has to see whether she has that emotional disturbance defense, she has that extreme, it's so extreme that she overreacts, and therefore she's not guilty of murder because she can't form the intent to commit a murder, but she can commit a homicide, maybe a manslaughter, because she has this emotional reaction to things that have occurred in her life in the past, which she said is being an abused woman. And she's laid out, and we don't know if there's any corroboration. And many times there's not in these cases. That's the problem. But we're going to hear more from Shayna Hubers. You have to stay tuned. Right after this break, we'll be back and make your judgments. Well, I can tell from the chat room that you're all still here on a Friday afternoon because this is such a fascinating case, this Shayna Hubers case. But you know, when cops investigate a case, one of the most important things they can do is something called old-fashioned shoe leather. That means they go around with their shoes on their shoe leather and their sneakers, and they talk to people. They talk to neighbors, they talk to family, and that's how you solve crimes. And that's what the cops are trying to do here, to see whether there are any witnesses that could corroborate what Shayna Hubers said, or was this a murder. So we're going to hear from Doris West. She's a downstairs neighbor. She is interesting. She's fascinating. Stay tuned and listen to her intently.
What happened next? Let me see.
Do you remember in relation to the shots?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. She had been in there just a few seconds and heard two shots. And in the beginning, I thought they were firecrackers, but I learned later they were not. And then there was 4 more shots, like boom, 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 boom. That's the way I heard them.
All right. And so this individual went in, you heard a chair scrape, and then a few seconds later you heard what you thought were firecrackers at first.
Yes, twice. I thought it was firecrackers, yes.
And do you know how long between the 2 and the 4 shots? If you know.
Maybe 6 seconds.
Okay, all right. Now, before the shots, did you hear any yelling or screaming or anything like that?
Absolutely no.
Okay. And you'd been living there a while. Mr. Poston had already been living there. Had you heard any yelling or screaming coming from above you in that apartment when he was there?
Never.
All right. And are you and Mr. West retired?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. And so would you be home? Sounds like you do go out, but would you be home a lot? Or?
Home a lot.
Okay.
Old people don't go out much.
And did you hear anything after the shots?
Yes, we heard a loud thump on the ceiling, and like someone falling, and that's what all I heard at that time.
Okay, all right. And then eventually the police showed up after that?
Oh, yes. The sirens and all that, and the police coming, yes.
Okay. Now, had you ever heard anything before coming from above on the 3rd floor? I know you said there was no yelling or screaming or noise or anything.
Never.
All right. And you said it was maybe weeping that night. Had you ever heard weeping before?
You're talking Friday night now?
No, before Friday night.
Before Friday. Yes, ma'am. On Thursday night, someone was on the deck weeping, not loud, just weeping softly, crying softly. And then also got up and went into the, and heard a voice, a male voice come out and said, "It's okay, it's okay." That's only 2 things I heard. just to say.
Okay, so that was the night before.
That was Thursday night.
That was Thursday night, okay. But you didn't hear any yelling or screaming or anything else?
No.
All right.
So that was the neighbor, Doris West, who said she heard no fighting, she heard no yelling, she heard no screaming, and her apartment was right below the apartment where Ryan Poston was shot to death by Shayna Hubers. So one of the questions I've been having is how do you believe, or who do you believe? And because there's been so much thrown out here, and I'm following the chat, and excuse me if I get your name wrong, Smile in NE, who says basically, right now, that's it, off with her head, she's lying. But then I get a text from somebody who's very important to me, a family member who says, I would have shot him too because I would have felt threatened. So it tells me that something's going on in this trial. Nicole, could you break this down for us? Is this successful? Is she being successful in this defense?
So I think that her testimony that was so emotional was very compelling, like I said earlier, making you believe that she felt this fear. You know, on the other hand, I don't know how you don't believe the downstairs neighbor. She has nothing to lose. Why would she come in and say something that wasn't true? And that sure does make the defendant look like a liar in this case.
So when I break it down, I say, is this common sense or nonsense? Is it common sense what the neighbor said or nonsense? What would you say about Doris West?
I say common sense.
Okay, so then when we get to the testimony regarding Ryan throwing Shayna down on the floor and Ryan putting a gun to that table, does your brain tell you that's common sense or nonsense?
Seems like nonsense to me.
Okay, so if you start having nonsense in front of a jury as a defense attorney, can you ever overcome that?
I think the jury starts to shut you out at that point. Once the jury starts to feel like you're lying to them, whether you're the prosecution or the defense, they're kind of done with you.
But
it's
she could
really
be,
hard to recover.
She still could have been abused as a youth, right? She could have been sexually assaulted as a kid by her father, correct?
She sure could have.
Boy, would I like to hear from her mother about this and other relatives about her childhood. She could have been sexually assaulted in school, correct?
She sure could have.
And if she's a broken person, does that make it that she doesn't get the murder conviction if she killed him in cold blood, or that she gets a lesser conviction or not guilty?
You know, it really is all about her state of mind. I mean, if she believed legitimately that she should be in fear for her life, then it could affect the verdict. But other than that, I think she's in trouble.
But how about Miss Ohio, who's going to, you know, Ryan was supposed to date that night. You know, Shayna was around and she knew that he was dating Miss Ohio, a replacement, so to speak, right?
Exactly. And that's going to be really hard for the jury to hear as well. I think she's in trouble.
Okay, so when you start having a motive, what happens in the courtroom, you lose credibility as a defense attorney. And if you lose credibility as a defense attorney to that jury, what happens? The jury doesn't really listen to what you're saying, even though they have listened to you and listened to your defendants. So we have to see more. We're going to watch more because the trial's not over. Stay tuned. We're going to break, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about the trial of Kentucky versus Shayna Hubers. It's actually a retrial for the killing of Ryan Poston. And we're going to hear next from a jail informant, somebody they call a snitch, or as we call in the legal community, and I had to look it up to get it right. I wanted to make sure you had it right, an incentivized informant. And what that means, they got something for the testimony. We may not know what it is. We may know what it is. But I just want to bring you to the point that in 15% of the wrongful conviction cases of the Innocent Project, there's been a jail snitch that has testified, and of course the person wasn't guilty. I don't know about this case dealing with Shayna. We're going to have to see what Holly Nivens has to say. Is it new? Is it something that no one would know? Or is it something that she just made up from what she could read because she would get a better deal from the prosecutor? So when we go into the courtroom, this is the woman who snitched on Shayna.
On the night of October 12, 2012, when did Ms. Hubers tell you she learned that Ryan Poston was leaving her or wanted her out?
It was early, it was before she had got back to the condo.
Before she arrived at the condo, she was aware of that?
Yeah.
And how had she become aware of it?
Because she was talking to Ryan on a cell phone.
On the phone. And when did Ms. Hubers tell you when she arrived back at Highland Meadows where Mr. Poston was or what he was doing?
He was on the back porch or patio or deck.
And what was he doing out there?
Smoking a cigarette.
All right. And with Mr. Poston, have you ever been to the Highland Meadows condominiums?
Never.
Do you have any way of knowing if they even have porches or decks outside from what Ms. Hubers told you?
No.
Is everything you know about the Highland Meadows condominium, specifically Mr. Poston's, from the defendant?
Correct.
Okay. And what did she tell you that while Mr. Poston was out, she arrived and he's outside smoking on the deck? What did she tell you she did?
She went to the back porch.
For what purpose?
To talk to him, to try to... She said that she was trying to push his buttons to try to get a reaction from him, to get him to get loud by talking about a case that he had had.
And what was the purpose for her to try to get loud, or try to make him get loud?
So somebody would hear that he was yelling at her.
And with her there trying to provoke him, did she tell you what Mr. Poston did?
I can't remember.
Okay. Did he remain there on the porch with her?
No, he went inside.
And where did he go?
I believe he went to his bedroom and locked himself in his room.
And did she tell you why he went to his bedroom and locked the door?
Because he did not want to fight with her.
And why wouldn't Mr. Poston just leave his condo?
I don't know.
So, Nicole, I'd like to speak with you about Holly Nivens, the cellmate who is the jailhouse informant or snitch or incentivized informant, as we like to say, but basically is giving testimony against her former cellmate. What did you just think about her offhand? What was your reaction?
She's not particularly likable, but, as the prosecutors will sometimes say, you have to go to hell to catch the devil. And that may be what their theory is here. Let's get all the information out in front of this jury so they can decide.
But I heard her say something that she talked to Shayna, and Shayna said that she was on a cell phone with Ryan Poston before she got there. Now, did the prosecutors, if you know, does anyone know, get the cell phone records to see if what Shayna said, what Holly says about what Shayna told her is true?
We haven't heard that yet, and it would be really interesting to find out whether or not that panned out. Or
maybe it's there, but maybe she calls him all the time. Remember, there was something that she had so many text messages to him, so many calls to him, but it says that she said that she was, remember, this is hearsay, okay? This is Shayna Hubers talking to her cellmate, who then comes to court to tell us. Why is this now considered reliable hearsay, since it's really, first party to second party and now to us?
It's not hearsay if it's an admission by a party opponent or if it's the defendant herself telling the story. And so that's why this court is allowing this testimony in and hearing her own words ostensibly through this person who heard them.
Is there anything you heard that Holly could have gotten just by reading the news reports? Is there anything new?
I don't really hear anything particularly unique or new, and I do think that your point about the phone records is an excellent one, because it would tell us a little bit about whether or not what she either heard or is claiming to have heard was reliable at all.
Okay, so there's going to be a lot more discussion, I assume, with this person, with this cellmate. Let's see if the police went to corroborate what she was saying. Let's see if the police found that everything that she said could be true. I mean, I heard something, I don't know about you guys, but heard something about Ryan locked himself in the bedroom. But then why did he come out? How did he come out? Did he come out with a fight? I am so interested. I can't wait for us to come back to this break to hear more about the jailhouse snitch and his testimony.
He was when she first shot him?
At the kitchen table.
According to Ms. Hubers, did he remain at the kitchen table for all the shots?
Yes.
At any point, did he fall?
He fell to the ground.
And what did she do at that point?
Went around to the opposite side and shot him.
While he was on the ground?
Yeah.
Ms. Hubers told you that Ryan Poston was ending their relationship on October 12, 2012. Did she make any comments to you about her view towards that or her actions towards that?
Yes.
What was that?
She had said that Ryan's family had a bunch of money and that they could buy a new child.
I'm sorry, can you please say it into the mic so they get it?
That Ryan's family had a bunch of money and that they could buy a new child.
After the shooting, did Ms. Hubers tell you what she did after shooting Ryan Poston?
Yes.
Can you please tell the jury?
She had called her mom.
And what, is that the first thing she did, or had she taken other actions prior to that?
She said that she had cleaned up, was trying to clean up the apartment.
Okay. I want to ask you specifically, you say she was trying to clean up. Were there specific items that Ms. Hubers was dealing with when trying to clean up?
Yes.
Please explain.
Yes.
And what were those?
The gun.
What did she tell you that she had done with the gun after the shooting?
That she had wiped the prints off and put it in her purse.
And why was she putting the gun in her purse?
Because she had a conversation with her mom, and her mom said that she wanted to meet her, potentially.
And do what with it?
I'm sorry.
Ma'am, you're going to have to speak
I'm
up.
sorry.
I apologize for keep asking you to speak up, but you're going to have to for the record. And if you need to get closer to that mic,
Okay.
you can get.
I
Please do.
apologize.
And you had said that they were potentially going to meet and do what with? What was the purpose of them meeting, she and her mother?
Well, they had phone conversation. On the phone conversation, she had said that they were going to try to make it seem like it was a suicide, or that they were going to, take the gun and come back either that following Sunday or Monday and make it seem like they had just found Ryan's body there.
Did Ms. Hubers originally told you that she had killed Ryan Poston out of self-defense. Did she tell you or give you any ideas where the idea for a self-defense claim would have come from?
She said that Ryan was abusing her.
Did she tell you if she was aware of anyone else who had had a successful self-defense claim?
Yes.
And can you please tell us about that?
She had said that her mom was in a situation like that. One of her employees at the school that she worked at, she had beat a self-defense claim that she had shot somebody and got away with it.
Did she discuss that? According to Ms. Hubers, did they discuss that on the phone that night?
I believe so.
Ms. Nivens, to your knowledge, or according to what you heard from Ms. Hubers, had Shayna talked to her mother on other times on October 12, 2012, besides after shooting Ryan Poston?
Yes.
Had she seen her mother that day?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
That I believe that they were at Ryan's parents' house the night before, and they had drank too much, and she wanted her mom to come stay with her and sleep with her. And they woke up and they went shopping, but she said that her mom had prayed with her, saying that to remove Ryan from Shayna's life, in life and in death.
Removed Ryan from Shayna's life.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Can you please say into the microphone so the record gets you what their prayer was that day?
Objection, Your
She
Honor.
said it.
Yes,
Objection sustained.
Wow, Holly Niven just gave another statement that I think is devastating against Shayna Hubers. And let me see, I wrote it down. I wanted to get it right because it was so important. Ryan's family had a bunch of money and could buy any child. Remember, that's added to, she gave Ryan the nose job he always wanted. That's added to the fact that at the gun range, she wanted to turn around and shoot him and pretend it was an accident. That's added to all these horrible things. So we are still in this case of Shayna Hubers and Ryan Poston. So Nicole, when Holly talks about the mother being involved here, is there another conspirator?
I don't know that there's another conspirator as much that there may be some effort to hide what actually happened for a longer period of time from the police, but not in the murder itself. I don't think that the mother's at any risk here for the murder.
But we haven't heard the mother testify yet. If she doesn't testify, there may be a reason. Maybe she can't corroborate what her daughter says, correct?
That's correct.
Or maybe she can, that they were she was planning to try to help her daughter cover it up and make it seem like self-defense. I've never heard somebody call 911 and say, I just killed somebody in self-defense. Normally they're attacking me. I thought I was going to die. I grabbed for the gun. How about you in your cases in Texas?
Yeah, no, normally they're not throwing out a bunch of legal terms or legal principles for the reasons why they committed a crime. If they've, hurt somebody or done something that's out of character, they're explaining if it's an emergency on 911 exactly what happened and why, but not in a legal way.
And that's what, remember the 911 operator said, and you waited, you gave him, remember, she gave him a last shot to the head because he was twitching, right, Nicole?
Exactly.
And he was twitching, and she wanted to put him out of his misery like an old movie, They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Add that to the statement that the Postons could buy any child. What do you come up with?
It's pretty horrible. Lots of nasty, nasty things have been said as having come from this defendant's mouth, and that just really may be too much for this jury to get past.
Well, this is some trial on a Friday. Shayna Huber's taking the stand yesterday. We're hearing the clips today. You usually don't get the defendant to take the stand. She has to take the stand because she's advancing a self-defense and extreme emotional disturbance defense under Texas law. So we're seeing firsthand how she thinks, what she thought. Is she making it up? Is she telling the truth? We can decide ourselves, but the only people that matter are in that jury, in that courtroom. But wow, I don't know about you, but I'm emotionally exhausted from this case this week. Stay tuned. So we are back in this emotional case of Kentucky versus Shayna Hubers, where Ryan Poston, her then boyfriend, was killed. We're about to hear from some of the crime scene technicians. This specifically crime scene person, investigating officer, is Bill Birkenhauer. He went to the apartment after Shayna called 911. And so he investigated, he documented the crime scene. And whenever you have a crime scene, it's extremely important to document every little thing in it because you never know what's going to be important. And if you're a defense attorney like me, you never know what I could pick out that may help my client. So let's stay tuned. Listen intently on Mr. Bill Birkenhauer.
I want to ask you specifically about what the defendant said about the victim's position, Mr. Poston's position at the time he was first shot. As an investigator, can you tell me the importance of what's been marked as Commonwealth's Exhibit number 130? I'm going out of order. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, by the time I arrived at the crime scene, I'd already, like I said, observed some of Ms. Huber's statements, and I'd already also talked to the officers that were present. The statement about her standing on one side of the table and shooting Mr. Poston from across the table as he was seated at the kitchen table, or I believe she said he was seated or starting to stand up. That is important for this picture here because, as you can see, Mr. Poston's legs are slightly bent, extended out in front of him, which would be underneath the table, and his feet appear to be crossed. Based off of the positioning of Mr. Poston's body there, it's obvious that he was sitting because if your feet are extended in front of you underneath the table, you can't start to stand up. When you start to stand up, you pull your feet back up under you or put them underneath you as you start to stand up. Based on this picture, it's clear, again, he was sitting, legs extended at the chair.
I'm going to show you now what's been marked. Go back to 129. Does this also show a different angle of that or a different version of that?
Yes, it is a different angle, again, with the slightly bent legs and feet extended under the table. Yes, I can. That's the living room area, both TVs and the love seat in the picture, chair in the middle of the living room floor, and footstool.
And can you explain to the jury the importance of this photograph from your investigative perspective?
Well, a couple things. One, you can start to see the clutter and the stuff in the living room with the chairs in the middle of the floor and the footstool and things of that nature. Both TVs are on. Both TVs are in place. The one TV.
What does that mean, in place?
Means they're not knocked over on the floor, knocked over, pushed against the wall, damaged in any way. These TVs also were pretty much covered in dust. So it's obvious that nobody even brushed up against the TVs because there would have been streaks from the dust on the screens and the sides.
And there was no dust disturbed?
No, there was not.
Again, just another outline picture 132, a little further away. I'm not sure if we had this one what's important is from your investigation with this photograph?
Again, just the amount of things in the middle of the living room floor. You have a coffee table, a chair, an exercise bike, the couches, the statement about being thrown from or pushed from the bedroom to the front door or thrown, or there was quite a few statements. This indicates, based off of the amount of items in the middle of the living room floor and nothing being disturbed. I think you can see the coffee table. There's quite a few items on there that obviously have not been disturbed. There does not appear that there could have possibly been any kind of struggle in the middle of that living room.
We talked a little bit about the table where Ryan was sitting.
Yes.
What'd you notice about the table?
Well, the first thing about the table was the amount of items laying on the table. There was pretty much something covering the whole table. That was important because of the statement about the gun sitting on the table and that she reached it or grabbed it out of his hand or he was trying to reach across the table to get the gun. There couldn't have possibly been any type of struggle there. Again, based off of the location of Mr. Poston's body, he was clearly sitting. In fact, he was sitting away from the table somewhat. Had there been any type of struggle or even if he'd been reaching across the table when he was shot, the body would have landed on the table, disturbing some of the items sitting there, which none of that was.
So that was the investigator, Bill Birkenhauer. And remember, Shayna Huber said she had this struggle with Ryan Poston. He threw her around. He threw her down the floor. He was throwing her against everything. Nothing was disturbed in the living room. Now, we can't see the pictures, but boy, I have a picture in my mind of everything being okay. Nicole, how did he come around out to you compared to what Shayna Huber said she did, and what happened?
Oh, I think he was the final nail in the coffin. The defense case is dead. If the jurors believe this investigator, and I don't see any reason so far in what I've seen that they wouldn't, there's no struggle, and everything that she's testified to has got to be false.
What if she invented a struggle in her mind? She thought there was a struggle as part of this battered woman that she has.
Well, it would appear to me that she also thought there might be a defense in that, but I'm not buying it. I think she's got big problems at this point.
So one of the things, again, photography is so important when you're looking at crime scenes. It's so important because it documents everything. Nicole, you've had cases, right, where you can pick up something from a photograph and it can help a defendant, hurt a defendant, right?
That's exactly right. And I've had cases, quite frankly, where some missing important piece of the puzzle is found in a photograph. And I've had cases where the prosecution hasn't seen what we're coming with, and it's right there in a picture, right up through to the point of being in trial.
So what this investigator just said basically about Shayna Hubers is that the physical evidence that he saw, that he documented, shows that her story, that she was thrown around like a cloth, like a dish towel, like a rag by Ryan Hubers was wrong, and that Ryan was just sitting like I was sitting at a table. What was he doing? Was he begging for his life? Did he know he was going to get shot? I can tell you the prosecution can't say that, but the jury is thinking that. The jury is thinking, what about his last 5 or 6 seconds? What was he thinking? That's what I'm thinking now, too. Stay tuned.
Screaming all these things. And I went to pick up my things out of his room. He said, "Can you hurry? Can you get out of here sooner?" And he was sitting at the table playing with ammunition or whatever it was he was playing with, glaring at me across the room as I was getting the stuff ready. And then that's when he stood up and was like, "Can you move it on a little faster?" And he picked me up to move me on faster as I was getting my things ready. And I don't have clothes on when I killed him. I killed him when I was naked. And then I put my clothes on to call the cops because I didn't want them to come get me naked. I think I just had this on. So don't wonder. I think I had this on. I'm guessing. In the underwear. But I put on my jacket and my shoes. So I was like getting dressed, getting out of there. Yeah. I was getting out. My things were packed in his house. Yeah. Like there's bags that are packed and sitting in his house. I was ready to be out of there. Right. My mother even helped me pack. Be done with him, Shayna. Be done with him. You know? He found that was evil, and I'm not a malicious person. Like, I'm not somebody who's ever done this. Like, anyone that knows me, like any character, because even his own family would say I'm a nice, good person. They can't say that thing about me. They're not thinking anyone. I'm scared that they obviously would leave me now. I'm gonna have a friend here. I fucking hate you. Really. When I shot him in the face, he had put his arm across the table, and there's a lamp, and he had put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs after he had thrown me around the room, and was saying emotionally to me, I fucking hate you. I hate your fucking Eastern Kentucky accent. I hate your mom. I hate your father. I hate everything about you for what you are. My family hates you. He was screaming and he had his hand on the table. And he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was announced it much. Like he was like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it, and twitching. And that's it. I couldn't, I love him. I still, even though it hurt, I still love him and he loves it. But I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. And he was about to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I shot him right here. I gave him his nose job. He wanted a pocket. He was twitching. There was his body was twitching, his legs were twitching. He walked around the table. And I think that's when I shot him in the head. I shot him probably 6 times. Shot him in the head. He fell on the ground. He was like laying like this. His glasses were still on. He was twitching some more. I shot him a couple more times just to make sure he was dead. Because I didn't want to watch him die. And it was already done. It was already done. It was already over. And I called my mom. I said, I killed Ryan. And she said, why? Are you not going to just kill him? What happened? And I told the story. I said, oh, do I just sit right here and just, and finally, she said, no, baby. She said, what would happen? She's like, you know, shouldn't have done the ability to have.
Well, you're hearing it's not really an interrogation. It's Shayna Hubers talking about the night she killed Ryan Poston when she's in police custody before she has a chance to be officially questioned, before time passes for her to go on the stand. Now, the question that we're going to have, and Nicole, the jury's going to have the same question, is what she's saying makes sense to you? Is it common sense to you that he is just sitting there with his glasses on and then she gets to shoot him?
It doesn't make any sense. As you had put it earlier, it's more nonsense than sense. And I would tell you, watching that video makes you feel like her mental problem is that it's arrogance. You know, she is just spinning this tale that looks like it's coming to her mind as some sort of an imaginary story. And she's just playing this role for the officer. But the problem is that she just talks nonstop.
Right. And Ryan posted at one point, I think she said one of the comments he made about her that she always talks nonstop, and she certainly did there, talk nonstop. But does it make sense to you that she could shoot him in self-defense in that posture?
It doesn't sound to me like she could. It sounds like her story is just completely fabricated.
Well, you know, if she was an abused woman, I mean, obviously this could have created some kind of mental issues with her. But Poston was so much bigger than she was. My thinking is that she had the gun on him, and she was making him stay there, and she was telling him all these things, and then he was spewing these comments, I hate you, I hate your accent, I hate you, because she has him into submission, and when he gets shot, he still has his glasses on. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, he's shot, he's not dead, he's twitching on the floor, and the person who says she loves him and shoots him in the head and gives him the final coup de grace. We'll be back for this case. Welcome back. We're still talking about and looking at and listening to Shayna Hubers in the case of Kentucky versus Hubers, where she is charged with the murder of Ryan Poston. She got lucky. She got convicted in the first trial, but because a juror was a felon, everything had to be undone, and now she's trying the case a second time, and there's a different strategy. She said she's an emotionally abused woman, and that's why she hit him. So we're going to listen to her in the courtroom, where she's talking about the items that she perceived as emotional abuse. And remember, abuse is abuse, whether it's emotional or whether it's physical. Let's take a listen. Stay with us.
Did you all continue to see each other after Thanksgiving?
Yes, sir.
And was that continuous, or were there bumps in the... Oh, that's me. Was that continuous, or was that continuous?
I know what you were getting ready to say. There were some bumps in the road, but there was one breakup between Thanksgiving and Christmas that lasted a couple weeks, and then we got back together about a week before Christmas and stayed together until late winter.
Ms. Hubers, during that late 2011 period, what did you believe that you needed to do to make this relationship continue to work with Mr. Poston?
Ryan always put pressure on me to orgasm. He put pressure on me to get breast implants, and he also put pressure on me to remain a certain size or lose weight. At one point, I lost weight for him, and he told me I was too skinny and to gain weight. He was always very particular about my size and things of that nature. The orgasm thing was the most important, I believe.
So here we are back. We just heard from Shayna Hubers, and this was the emotional abuse. It had a lot to do with sex. She needed breast implants. She couldn't orgasm right. Her size was too big. Her size was too small. Nicole, in all the years that you have had a case for homicide, for murder, for possibly manslaughter, have you ever had one that the emotional abuse consisted of these specific items?
I have, and I've had cases where that's really been a problem. In this case, some of what she's saying, much of what she's saying, quite frankly, does ring hollow, unfortunately. I think she's trying hard to establish that there was abuse, but if you watch her during this portion of the testimony, it's really not quite the same as it was in what we saw previously.
Well, how do you tell? How does a jury sit there and tell hollow from not hollow? I mean, you know, we talk about there's always a modicum of truth sometimes in what a defendant tells you as a reason for how she perceives abuse. Could this have been banter between them? Could she just perceive this as some type of emotional abuse? Or just did it to you just ring hollow, period, that it has nothing to do with this case, it had nothing to do with the murder of Ryan Poston?
I think it's completely hollow. I'm not buying it at all at this point.
So if she were to testify of different types of abuse, like what would that help you with? What kind of abuse, emotional, would help you? Not ring hollow.
From an emotional abuse standpoint, if she had told family members or friends had seen it, these kinds of things would be compelling to me. We haven't heard any of that right now, and she's the only person that we have this information that she was suffering through this terrible emotional abuse, if it even was abuse. Sometimes when you have somebody who is in an abusive relationship, it's ongoing, and you have that.
Well, abuse of women and is very, very terrible. Obviously, it's.
And was that continuous, or were there bumps in the? Is that continuous?
There's so many women who are abused and then get killed by their abuser, as we know, that it really needs to be addressed properly. So if she's making that, she's doing a disservice not only to the victim here, but to every single woman in the world who's had abuse, has had to deal with it, and has had to sometimes even kill their abuser to save their lives. Stay tuned. Kentucky versus Shayna Huber. Shayna, we can't get enough of her. Next clip, she's going to talk about on the stand how she felt abused by more things besides sexual things that we just discussed. We're going to listen and let's assess her credibility. Stay with us.
How did Mr. Poston treat you when you all were out together?
Ryan and I were both, you wouldn't know it to look at us. We were both thin people, but we both loved to eat. And we went out to eat all the time. Ryan took me out, especially in 2011, to eat often. I can't tell you how many restaurants we went to. And oftentimes in public, sometimes in public, he was nice to me, but sometimes when it was just him and I at a restaurant, he would pick on me and belittle me and bully me in front of strangers. And it could be for something as small as how I was eating my food. The way that I chewed my food bothered him. The way that he said I smacked my gums and it embarrassed him. And he would pick on me in front of the other people at the restaurant for smacking my gums. He also would pick on me for anything, just the smallest of things. It would be right in front of people, and sometimes it would get a little loud, and the other customers in the restaurant would look over, and it would just feel very humiliating and degrading.
Okay. Now, you got back together at some point in July, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Do you recall? Do you recall communication from Mr. Ryan about what would be necessary for you to continue to have a relationship with him?
Oh, okay. Well, when we got back together in July of 2012, I felt Ryan put conditions on the relationship. He said he wanted an exclusive relationship, and he labeled that as non-touching of other girls and guys, but that he wanted me to be his incognito girlfriend, and he wanted me to talk 25% less. He always said I talked too much, and he wanted me to get a hobby while I was at his condo, and he also wanted me to agree to have threesomes with other girls.
Did you all communicate about that via text communications?
Yes, sir. And in person.
What else did he want you to do?
He still wanted me to get the G-shot injection, and he wanted me to. Oh, I wasn't allowed to ask him about how his day went. He said I wasn't allowed to ask him about how his day at work went, because at the end of the day, he felt like the day was so bad. He used the expression, he literally wanted to put his fist through the wall.
Oh, that's more of Shayna Huber's and how she felt perceived, abused, or abused by Ryan Poston, which led to her eventually killing him. A last shot killed him in his face, gave him the nose job she said he always wanted. Now, when you look at her, Nicole, when you're assessing her, Nicole DeBorde from Texas, and you have to build a defense around here, do you look for other witnesses that would see this type of abuse, or do you just let her talk about it on the stand?
Oh, there's no way. If there's evidence of anybody else having heard or seen anything that she's describing, you definitely want to find those people and call them, because just watching her body language alone, and to be fair, my sound was cutting in and out while I was watching her, which was really interesting because she does not come across as someone who looks like they're telling the truth. She has a very sort of bold stance in the way that she's giving this story. It doesn't appear to be someone who is afraid.
Well, remember we discussed at the beginning that under this extreme emotional disturbance defense, it could be that she has overreacted to normal things, perceiving them as abuse because of the abuse in her childhood before. Could that be a reason why her affect is like that? And if it is, doesn't that help her then with a defense for the jury?
I'm not sure whether or not it helps her, but it certainly could be the product of that kind of history. And that's, again, a circumstance where you would want to call witnesses who could give that kind of evidence to this jury. This jury is going to need to understand as much as they can about who she is if they're going to believe her.
Well, let's assume she has a psychiatric disorder at this point, and that she is truly messed up at this point. Does that take away from her intent to commit murder? Does that reduce it from a murder to a manslaughter, to an EED defense, which gives her a manslaughter? What do you think?
I don't think that it does at this point. I don't think that she has given us enough information to make a reasonable person believe that she was in fear for her safety or her life, or that there would be ongoing abuse.
Well, so when I say to you common sense or nonsense, is it common sense or nonsense that she has an emotional disorder, a broken brain?
You know, that may be possible. I mean, I may go with common sense on that.
Okay. And if she does have a broken brain, does that help her let's assume she gets convicted, does that help her in the sentencing?
I think it helps her in the sentencing. I'm not sure that it helps her in this case from being convicted.
But no matter what happens, we do know that Ryan Poston is never going to recover, and that family is never going to recover from being involved with her, no matter what the situation, whether her brain was broken, whether she was abused or not, correct?
That is correct.
So when we see Shayna in the future, which we are, we also have to remember that her testimony, her statements are all something that maybe is nonsense to us. So we're going to be coming back to a new trial because, as we said, we had two defendants on the stand on this Friday afternoon. Fridays is where it happens, boy. Two defendants on the stand, Roy Oliver in the case of Texas where he shot Jordan Edwards to death. We were going to be listening to that trial, hopefully listening to him and assessing his credibility. Fridays is it, and attorneys use Fridays purposely so when you go into the weekend, you are really, really good in terms of your case. Stay tuned with us. We're going to move from Kentucky to Texas.